Hey guys, check this out.
Hello and welcome to Check This Out, a podcast where we take an analytical view of the media that appeals to us as individuals and why. I am L, your host, and with me today is special guest and enemy of the show, Chris. If you would, please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself.
Hey Al, hey everybody, thanks for having me on. My name is Chris, as previously mentioned, and enemy of the show. Oh god, where to start? I am a regular sort of Australian-born and bred consumer of media, and I've known Elle for I want to say sort of tangentially, probably almost 6 or 7 years now through various online communities.
I would have thought it'd be longer than that.
I was gonna say 10, but time's a weird, non-constant mess right now. So it could be 6, could be 15,
Could be like 3 minutes, who knows?
could be 3 minutes. Yeah, I'm not much else to talk through. I'm fairly run-of-the-mill, bog-standard guy.
Yeah, fair enough. And sometimes that's what you need.
Exactly.
If everyone was special, no one would be special.
Exactly. I'll stick by that.
Now, you're bringing something to the table that you enjoy and are passionate about. Could you talk a little bit about it in your own words?
Absolutely. So today, I'm coming to you. This welcome to my TED talk. I'm here to explain why every Australian born for the last 50 years quintessentially defines the best and most Australian iconic film as The Castle. And I claim baloney. I think that's hogwash. I maintain the best Australian film and the prototypical Australian film is Crackerjack by Mick Malloy. A fantastic tour de force about a middle-aged loser who turns into a patron saint and saviour of a local bowls club.
Which is just a very Australian sentence to begin with.
It really is. It's absolutely beautiful. I think when I originally tweeted about this, the conversation we had was the reason the castle isn't valid anymore is because it's about land ownership. The reason Crackerjack is because it's about a drunk who goes bowling. And if you've ever worked in an office job in Australia, you've been a drunk who's gone to a bowls club.
Yeah, it's kind of the national identity almost.
It really is. Cricket's nice, but you've got to wear equipment. Bowls is great because it's easy, it's low effort, and the beer is cheap.
Yeah. Well, it's all aimed at like the elderly, so you got to get that pension money.
Exactly.
Cool. So I have my prepared list of questions that are designed to delve a little bit deeper into that enjoyment of yours, if that's all right.
Beautiful. Go for it.
Question 1. Imagine I was someone who has recently been awoken from a coma, or resurrected from being frozen in ice, or even an inanimate object gifted knowledge of modern times and sentience. Essentially, I know what media is, but I've never experienced any. How would you explain Crackerjack without comparing it to something that I wouldn't know?
Oh, that's a good question. So up until that last sentence, it's very easy. But I think, it's hard to quantify that. Right up until the last sentence of, if without comparing it to something else, I had an idea. But I think if I were to take a single sentence, it'd be, this is a really good example of Australiana at its best. And the reason I say that, it's an underdog story at heart with a mildly irritating main character who's a sarcastic, chain smoking, drinking idiot who, despite all of that, you love and you want to win. It's the perfect low stakes sports epic. So instead of things being, win the thing and take your team to the national championship or the international championship or the Olympics. The the entire sort of stakes of Crackerjack is a few $1,000s to stop the local bowls club going under, so that Mick Malloy, our I'm going to say hero in heavy air quotes, can keep his initially can keep his parking spots, but in the end is because he grows to love the club, and that's just what you want to see. It's an idiot who learns to love a thing and grow some responsibility.
Yeah, and to use a very well-known Australian example of like the underdog, the Stephen Bradbury story.
100%. Except Stephen Bradbury had to train and continue to excel, and he had to practice, and he wanted to get where he was. And again, the stakes were much higher for him. But it is a very similar situation. It's sort of failing upwards at its finest.
Again, the quintessential Australian story.
Exactly. The other thing that's phenomenal about this movie is I mean, it came out in the early 2000s, I believe. I should have had this.
2002, from
There we
what
go.
I've seen.
I was going to say 2004, so you're better read than I am. Is looking back and watching this through the lens of someone 20 years on and recognizing Australian faces. It was all filmed in-house in Victoria, which is where it's set. It was all Australian cast members, and a lot of them are in sort of an Australian equivalent of the Happy Madison gang, where all of them are the same faces appearing in different stories. Mick Malloy's made a couple of different movies, and he regularly employs the same core group of people to play different roles. But it's phenomenal looking back and seeing these kid versions of people who are still Australian media personalities, because it's very interesting to see 20 years a snapshot of where we were.
Yeah, and you can go to certain people and go, "Oh God, you've aged horribly."
Oh yeah, Mick Malloy is now everyone's dad. He's just he's at the time he was mid-20s to mid-30s, dude. Bit of a belly, bad hair, bad facial hair. Now he's going grey a bit. He's put on a lot of a belly. He's he's a bit more jowly than he was, and you can see the natural progression.
Just how time destroys us all.
It's just atrocious.
Okay, question 2. Hypothetically, our positions are reversed, and I'm guesting on your immensely popular and award-winning podcast. I've just answered the previous question with your response verbatim. What stood out to you the most?
Well, for one thing, it's how phenomenally well written and clean the prose was. Like it was forged from the angels. But if I were to talk about content, I think the thing that stands out to me is that it's an underdog story, which everyone loves. Everyone loves an underdog story. It's why betting exists. If people didn't love an underdog, then every piece of sports betting would be who do we think's going to win? Everyone bets on them. But an underdog story exists because we like to see the little guy getting it up over the big guy. And at its heart, I think, as I mentioned, that's sort of why I relate it to The Castle, because that's what that was. It was a little guy getting it up over the big guy. In that case, it was a small family getting it up over a corporation. In this case, it's the early mid-20s loser getting it up over the crooked media and sort of game sports owning entrepreneur, and it's baron, I think, is a better word. And it's that's what jumps out at me is the underdog story. I think it's something that's not as often explored in a way that I find enjoyable, because everything has to be massive stakes.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, it is a genre that is a little bit of a dying breed because you don't get the what was it, the Bad News Bears or like a Sandlot Kids or anything like that.
Absolutely.
Not as
E-
much anymore. Everyone
Even
wants the big Marvel, like showy explosion things.
100%. Even when you think about mid 70s, Rocky is an underdog story, and it's one of the most critically acclaimed movies of all time because he was a little down and out, who was picked up and given his shot in the limelight, and he made it work. I think it, like you said, it's a dying breed. I think it's underrepresented this sort of time frame because everything escalates. Everything always escalates, and it's interesting that you mentioned the Marvel movies. I think that's a really good example of it. If you look at the first sort of entries into the Marvel genre, um, Iron Man fights guys of his own making. Um, Captain America's in World War II. We can probably put that one on a side burner. Um,
Put it on ice.
yeah. That's awful. Oh, I love it. Um, but if you look at the stakes in the first couple of phases, with a couple of outliers, they're not universe shattering, massive, damaging component. They're little stories about people. When you start looking at the later ones, everything's escalated. With a few exceptions, everything's escalated, and that's just where the new stakes start to happen. So
Yeah.
when Infinity War and Endgame finish, and we've moved into Phase 4, the little stories don't seem big enough anymore.
Yeah, you no longer have your friendly neighborhood Spider Man. You have Spider Man who went to space and saved the galaxy.
Exactly, and that's 100%, and it's why I think they've had to reset with sort of actually taking a note here. When are we publishing this? And what do we feel about spoilers?
Uh, uh, Probably after this is recorded, and
Okay, good, because I'm gonna go. This is why they have to reset. They had to reset in No Way Home when he lost it, when everybody, and they went, oh, actually, I could really garner some hatred. Um, okay, so yeah, I completely agreed, 100%. I think that's why in No Way Home they had to completely reset that expectation. He's no longer Spider-Man Peter Parker who went to space. Um, he is the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and everybody's forgotten who he is because you need to reset that underdog expectation and that little guy living the big life, but not necessarily the same scale as it was before.
even if they did kind of weirdly stuff it up with just forgetting Peter Parker, and Spider Man is still a thing that had the entire history.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Look, I really liked that movie. I genuinely did. I feel like the fact that they had Happy come and talk to Aunt May's grave and go, "I know her through Spider-Man." That one scene probably fueled 85% of the internet discourse around. But hang on, how does that work? Luckily, this is a prime example of we can literally say a wizard did it and move on.
Yeah. And really, what are people spending all their time watching kids' movies for?
Yeah. Excuse me. I think you'll find when you hit the same xylophone, the same bone in Scratchy's ribcage, it played two different notes.
And I counter that with your Genius at Work T-shirt.
Exactly.
Question three. We can tell that this is a subject that you care about, but what got you to give it a chance in the first place?
So here's an interesting thing. I actually hadn't watched this movie before the lockdown in 2020 began. So uh, it was something that I knew existed, and it had been on TV a couple of times when I was growing up, but I never actually watched it. And then in 2020, when everything happened, capital E, capital H,
The Backstreet Boys reunion tour, yes.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. When when everybody suddenly became very invested in their apartments and houses, um, I kind of went on a media binge, and started. I picked up every streaming service under the sun and started going through and watching stuff that I hadn't seen before. And so I found this on, I think at the time it was Netflix. Uh, it is since not on Netflix, uh, but I found it, watched it with a few beers in me, and absolutely loved it. I went, actually, this is really good, and have since watched it, I would probably say 20 or so times. Um, it's become one of my staples of light, entertaining, comedic background watching because it's funny and it's easy to watch and it's not massive investment of brain power. And I'll tell you, if there's one thing I haven't had over the last 3 years, it's a massive surplus of brain power.
I think that's just universally applicable.
Exactly. It's yeah. The great unpleasantness has been really good for sapping the energy out of people.
Yeah, although, staying home would sounds really good. I wish.
Yeah, see, it's interesting. The first couple of months, I was like, "Oh, this is great! I get to work from home every day." But I do live in a small two-bedroom inner Sydney apartment with my girlfriend and two cats. Um, from where I am currently sitting, which is at my desk in the main room, uh, which is not just where I work, but also where my gaming computer is, I can literally see every part of the apartment. So there is an element of smallness to that, and I do kind of miss being able to go into the office. Um, but needs must.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who very much did not get the chance to
Mm.
isolate or remain home or do anything like that, uh, you're not missing much.
No, I think the genuinely the only thing I'm missing is the sort of interconnectedness. It's something I actually read this online a little while ago, but if there's one unintended side effect of the pandemic that we've all realized, it's determining exactly how much of an introvert you actually are. Because I used to think absolutely an introvert, but actually I think I'm sort of an intrextrovert. I recharge at home, but I 100% need human interaction or I go loopy. And work used to fulfill that sort of passively. But when we had 6 months of lockdown in Sydney, and it was my girlfriend was off work because everything had shut down and she works in retail, and so we had 6 months where we were basically 24/7 seeing each other and sitting on each other's lap. It was a very stark realization that actually I sort of need the outside world a little bit. So uh, yeah,
Does make you wonder about like how many relationships started or ended because of that.
a hundred
Just like
percent.
this is like the ultimate test.
Yeah, absolutely. This is. I completely agree. I think there's some very interesting in 5 years when it's maybe not so raw. I think there's probably some very interesting sort of socio economic data to be reviewed on how many relationships started and ended, how many what the situation is with regards to all this millennial saving I keep hearing about but not seeing. Um, I think there's it's definitely a sort of sparking point for change societally, and something that's going to be retrospectively very neat to see.
I think I read like just a snippet of a report from the UK. Actually, it's like over the last couple of years, 22% of people self-reported that they're happier being single and just will not be dating ever again.
Yep.
And 8% said they are far more open to same-sex relationships than they have ever been.
Absolutely, yeah, completely agreed. I saw I saw, I don't know if it was the same report, but I actually saw one. I want to say yesterday. That was a woman saying, "Actually, I'm 37, I'm single, and I'm happy being single." And that's just a thing that's sort of come out over the last 3 or 4 years, and they realized maybe the whole societal go and get married or you're a degenerate is not relevant.
I think I did see that same one, and it's just like, well, that's a little bit of sour grapes for me as someone who is a lifelong aromantic asexual.
Yes.
So it's like, oh, come, I was here first.
Yeah,
Come
yeah,
on.
exactly right. Yeah. Clearly, at the very least, you should get royalties.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is, the cis white woman that gets the publicity.
Yeah,
Not to get too controversial.
yeah, I was gonna say I'm gonna stay entirely out of that as a cis, largely hetero, sort of asterisk white guy in his mid-30s. It's the Homer Simpson character, the Homer Simpson quote. I'm a white male in his I'm a white male aged 20 to 50. Everyone listens to me.
I made myself sad.
Yeah.
Question 4.
Mm.
For some people, a sense of community and like-mindedness are integral to their enjoyment of something. To your knowledge, is there a community around Crackerjack that you're aware of? And if so, what are they like?
It's a very interesting question. I don't know, actually. What I will say is that it's become one of the movies that I regularly spruik to everybody I can. So whether or not there's an active quote-unquote Crackerjack community, I think it's something that I very much like the idea of promoting back out. I think it's an interesting one to see, right? I think old media, it's 20 years old. It's barely even old enough to, it's not old enough to drink in the States. But older media is something that often gets brought back up as, cult classics. And I think this is something that falls under cult Australian classic. Maybe not as massively successful when it came out, but something that I could very easily see being done at a, Australiana revival movie marathon at a theatre in the inner west.
I was literally just going to say, it's like, you're probably not going to see too many things on the level of like Rocky Horror, where you get everyone in your bowling whites go down to the club for a screening.
Yep. No, I think that's probably unlikely, but 100% if they did a, classic Australiana movie marathon where you had, The Castle and Mad Max and Crackerjack and Wolf Creek and a bunch of other sort of classic Australianas. And that's a whiplash of a thematic lineup that I've just put in there, but you know where I'm going with that. I think this would be something that I could see featuring in that, because it really is a very classic Australian feeling movie, and I feel like one that has, I don't want to say passed people by, but maybe doesn't get the same level of sort of recognition as a lot of other movies in the Australiana genre.
Yeah, it didn't get the chance to have critical acclaim or critical panning.
Exactly, which is I think actually really disappointing, because it is a really well constructed, 3 to 4 act story, and one of the things I thought about the other day is I want to evaluate this, but I'm 99% sure it follows the hero's journey, because it starts with the call to action. He declines the call. He comes in reluctantly. He picks up his weapon. He begins his journey. He returns home, and then he is happy and content in his situation. And I want to actually lay it out, but I'm like 99% sure that it adheres to that. And if so, this might be my favorite adaptation of the hero's journey ever.
Yeah. You just don't get the 2 hour session of screaming to power up.
Well, this is it. It's it's the it's the Australiana Kai as opposed to the original screening.
Yeah, not the original Z dub of Australiana.
Exactly. Yeah. Far less filler on Namek in Crackerjack than in previous iterations.
But do you get to see Mick Malloy learning to drive?
No, but you do actually see a section of it. It's funny you say that. One moment. It's funny you say that, because the opening scene is him driving through. So I haven't actually gone too deep into it, but the storyline centers around Jack as a Australian idiot in Melbourne who works opposite a bowling club and for about 10 years has been a member at said bowling club, so that he can have the free parking for members across the road from his work rather than having to pay parking costs in the centre of Melbourne. And he works for a bank. He's working as a call centre in a bank. He is very obviously a degenerate. There's a very amusing scene where he's being brought. Anyone that's ever worked in a call center knows about this scene. But they basically he's sitting in a sort of call quality assessment with a supervisor who's listening to one of the calls from somebody else in the team and saying, "This is great. What was so great about that?" So, well, she did this and she did that and she promoted the online banking and she da-da-da-da. So I'm going to give this a 84.17%. Clap, 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 clap. And it's ingrained in every person that's ever worked in a call center's soul when they see that. But the opening scene is this hilarious. He pulls up to a set of lights. There's a throughput actually throughout the whole movie of just little snippets of radio, so like talkback radio, with some really upsettingly accurate talkback radio sort of commentary, largely. I'm going to say racially insensitive, which is just upsetting to know how accurate that is. But he's sitting there, he's listening to his talkback radio, he pulls up to a set of lights. One of the homeless guy comes up and cleans the window, puts his hand out for the coin, and he just drives off. And as he's going into the intersection, another bloke pulls up and goes to turn, and Malloy pulls up and honks his horn and just gives him an earful. And it's hilarious because it's the most Australian earful I've ever heard. I mean, where did you learn? It's an older bloke, and he says, "Where did you learn to drive, you hat-wearing fool, on horseback? What the hell's wrong with you?" And it's just this beautiful, curse-free bollocking in the perfect Australian sort of vein of yelling at people in our own language.
God, I know my dad's kind of mellowed out a little bit when driving, but one of his favourites was, "Oh, where'd you get your licence? Out of a box of Weet-Bix."
Perfect. That's exactly it. It's curse-free, it's extremely PG, but you know what he's saying. It's beautiful. My dad used to, but quite regularly actually, one of the maybe it's just a dad thing. They mellow out with age, but mine used to quite regularly call people who cut him off in traffic flaming pelicans. Get a load of this flaming pelican.
Oh, you couldn't get more, Aussie.
It's 100%, and it's absolutely entered my lexicon. Largely, actually, when I'm talking to Americans, because you ham it up for the crowd.
Oh yeah, I did a vacation in the US literally a month before everything kicked off, so I think pretty good timing.
Yeah.
But whenever I would go into a shop, it's like normally I'd go, "Oh hey, how are you going?" But no, when you're in the US, you go, "Hey, how you going?"
Yeah. G'day, Cobb, how you going?
Yeah. Oh no, I'm just having a sticky beak.
Oh yeah, God, I love the Australian. I'm big fan of Oh yeah, just taking a gander at that one.
Yeah, just having a butcher's, thanks.
That's it. It's hilarious. I love flummoxing foreigners, and it's never used in common conversation in Australia. It's very rare. No, it sounds ridiculous. But
when's the last time you or I have ever genuinely said "g'day"?
Oh, quite regularly. I do it all the time. Okay. That's Oh no. I'm a bad use case for that because I'm the now that I'm in my mid-30s, I am extremely Australian. But I quite regularly g'day people, unironically. But 5 years ago, the question stood.
Yeah, but it's like I basically never say that. Except when I was in the States, and it's just like, oh yeah, drop it every time I get. Just to
Absolutely.
confuse people, because I find it funny.
100%. It's the verbal equivalent of drop bears. It's
Yeah.
it's the actually genuinely I think it's the verbal equivalent of people who wear the flag of their country on their backpack.
Mm.
Because nobody else is gonna, it's like Americans who wear Canadian flags to hide it. We're not hiding. We're not hiding anything. It'd be ridiculous. I'm Australian. I'm going to be as loud and as brusque as I possibly can, but I'm going to do it with Australian class.
Yeah, the good old larrikin nature.
Absolutely. I was actually having this conversation with my dad recently, and he said any Australian is welcome in any bar anywhere anywhere on the planet, because we have basically, it's probably not as accurate now as it used to be, but we can make friends in any bar on the planet in 5 minutes, because there's typically three things we talk about. I'll buy you a beer. How's local sports team going? Oh, yeah, I know about that. We'll do this. And third is to hell with the British. And that works everywhere, including in England.
Oh yeah, they know what they're on about.
Absolutely. And particularly when you start the conversation with, I buy everyone a beer, but none of that piss weak warm stuff that you guys call beer. Anyway, did you see the rugby? God, what's wrong with you people? Your largest export is sports that all your colonies beat you at. Anyway, to hell with the British. And then you raise a beer and everyone's friends with you.
Yeah.
So it's that good-natured larrikinism. And I think it's endemic everywhere we go.
Question 5.
Mm.
There are many aspects of media that resonate differently with different people. What is your favourite part?
That is a very interesting question. Particularly lately, and I think this is absolutely a sort of side effect of the capital T, the times that we live in. But I think the thing I like particularly about this is the low stakes to it. They make a point throughout the whole thing. It's the prize is $7,000 to save the bowling club. It's like the win $5,000 to save the rec center. And they make a point throughout that Mick Malloy's an absolute natural. If he stopped messing around and applied himself, he'd have a $1,200 bowling arm. And it's this low stakes in the grand scheme of things. And I think given the last 5 years, 10 years of international climate and the fact that everything's on fire all the time everywhere, it's nice to have a low stakes sort of moderately amusing satirical parody movie that you can still get invested in.
Yeah, it's like each one of his fingers is insured for $50.
Exactly, 100%. He's an absolute natural. If he wanted to, he could go and become the Don Bradman of bowls, and he's got a $1,200 bowling arm. It's absolutely great. It's this. It's important to the people involved, but it's so low stakes in the grand scheme of things. And I like that. I think it's like I said before, it's nice to not have apocalyptic world-ending, terror every time you watch a movie.
Or even like using the sports genre as the example. It's like not everything has to be win the Super Bowl or your mother dies of like a broken heart or something.
Exactly. I mentioned Rocky before. He was battling for the World Heavyweight Championship. Not everything has to be for the World Heavyweight Championship. And it's actually a good example. They never made a sequel to this, but if they did, it's a perfect example of how that limits you. Because Rocky, number 1, World Championship. Number 2, the same World Championship, the same deviled egg. Number 3, World Championship, except he got cocky. Number 4, World Championship against the guy who just beat the former world champion to death in the ring. Number 5, World Championship, except now he's old. It's the same movie with a different filter on top. and so there's nowhere to go, nowhere to grow. And I think that's interesting. I mean, I don't know where you can necessarily grow with a where the sequel can come from a movie about saving
Yeah.
a bowls club, but the principle stands.
Yeah, well, I mean, I assume the sequel would be a rival bowls club. It wants to expand or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because that's literally the plot of this one is sort of is the bowls club is out of money. People aren't joining. There's no fees coming in, and so Bernie Fowler, the Baron of what do they call the bowls the the Las Vegas of bowls clubs, where he's introduced pokies and Keno, and is you can't bring food in, you've got to buy it on site, and he's portrayed as this absolute devil of a character, um, is trying to swoop in and buy Cityside, which is the club that they're saving, by A, buying it out, and B, renovating it and putting in 500 pokies. And they hate it. They don't want pokies. It's very antithetical, which is very amusing because it's such an Australian thing. Is the war on pokies?
Hmm.
So that's another very hilarious hook in the tail there, and probably doesn't mean anything outside of Australia, which I think is very amusing to me.
I was going to say, for the international listeners, pokies are the poker slot machines.
Correct. They're basically the walls of them that you see in every shot when you go to the Bellagio in Vegas, and you walk through, and there's hundreds of these things in banks of five with older people sitting there slotting coins in one after the other after the other. They're Skinner boxes, and as Bernie Fowler makes the point of saying, they're rigged so that they can't win. He says they turn over $50,000 a year per machine because they're absolutely programmed that you can't win. Nobody can win. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. And I think that's hilarious and very on the nose, because that's absolutely mimicking the conversation that's been going on in Australia for 15 years.
Yeah.
It's in Western Australia, they have maintained the only place that you are allowed poker machines is in the casino. Burswood Casino, Crown Casino now, is the only place in Australia, and in Western Australia, and I think possibly one casino up towards Broome, which for the outside of Australians is the other end of the state. It's like having one in Florida and one in New York.
The distance is probably about accurate, so
yeah, I had to think. I was going to say New York and Canada, but even that's not far. It's one on the very south and one on the very north of the continent.
And don't get us started about Texas. It's been measured. Western Australia is bigger.
Absolutely, you can fit Texas 3 times in WA. It's everything's bigger in Texas except Texas, which isn't big enough for Western Australia. Pew pew pew.
I know that there was a bit of a fervour about the South Sydney Leagues Club getting rid of all the pokies.
Absolutely.
Like, well, why would you do that? That's your revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just like, well, no, because it's bad.
Yeah. Yep. It's interesting. One of the things I've noted about in a West Sydney at the moment, having lived here for 7 years now, basically every pub has a VIP room, which is your smoking and pokies. And one of the things that's happening in the last couple of years, which is great, honestly, is a whole bunch of pubs that are getting renovated are getting rid of the pokies. They're stripping them away. Don't need it anymore. There's one near my place that has recently been re-renovated, and they got rid of the pokies and turned that whole thing into a kids' room. So like a playroom and creche for families that want to bring kids to the pub for lunch and whatnot, and then someone goes and takes the kids in there, and everybody else can stay out and have a few beers. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, you have your bistro section, and then you have your actual bar.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's great. It means that you don't have this sort of quarter of it, which is predatory, habit-inducing, economically unviable stomping ground for people who don't need that in their lives.
I thought you said they kept the bar.
Now let's not be un-Australian. The bar is an important part.
Question 6. Following on from the previous question, what do you think would appeal most about Crackerjack to the general public?
It is a perfect Australian snapshot that I have already used to introduce to people outside of Australia what Australian filmmaking does. So even though it was made 20 years ago, this is a terrifying sentence to say out loud, but even though it was 20 years ago, it's extremely applicable to right now, and it's a time capsule. There's early 2002 was recent enough that it's not, analog TVs and landlines only, but it's far enough away that nobody has a smartphone, for example. But that doesn't really date it because it doesn't come up, and it's great. It's a little snapshot of sort of Australian culture. There's the repeated jokes about so they're at the bar in the bowls club, and he goes off to go get his beers at drinks, and he comes back and he goes, "This is incredible, boys, genuine 1972 prices," and he's got his 4 little schooners of beer, and it cost him a $20 note. And it's great. It's this perfect little Australia, and then they snap away and they do the sort of time jump of coming back after the tea break. And there's 8 empty beers and an ashtray full of stubbed out cigarettes, and they're doing the sandwiches and the pavlovas and the whole. It's beautiful. It's this little snapshot of Australiana, and I think that's the thing that appeals most to me is you don't get that anywhere else. I say this 100% knowing that it's not accurate, but I would say, well, it's accurate-ish. I would say a very, very large amount of consumed media is Americanized.
Absolutely.
It's in homogenous town USA.
But that's why basically every country that I am aware of has a thing. It's like, no, we need a required amount of homegrown content.
Absolutely. Yep. This is the one I go, but the Canadian content, right? The X percentage of your content has to be made in Canada. And this is a really good one, actually. Crackerjack, I'm just going to double check it, but I'm 99% sure, was 100% Australian. It was purely made. It was filmed. It was all the video effects and all the songs are Australian. It's fantastic. So I think it's something that is important, that we have our own, cultural voice, and it's a little disappointing that it's largely gone away.
Yeah. Question 7. Say that I do end up enjoying this because of your excellent recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
What would be your number 1 follow-up? It doesn't necessarily have to be a sequel or anything, but where would I turn if I wanted more of the same?
Geez, that's an interesting one. I'm going to cop out on this. I'm going to take the cheap answer. There's another Mick Malloy movie that I've recently watched called, I believe it's Bad Eggs. I'm just going to double check that. But it came out in 2003, a year later, starring a large number of the same people, and it's a comedic parody cop drama. So it's 2 cops who are, this is early 2003, so take this with a grain of salt considering current climate, but 2 good cops in a bad precinct. But basically they are but they're parrying it up quite well because they're the 2 cops that were put in the zero tolerance unit, armed to the teeth, special investigative and special detainment powers, but they play it very clearly as this is a bad idea. And they uncover a web of corruption in the sort of mayorship and police department and local government. And it's also the other thing I would say about it that's very much worth recommending. Starring role for a bunch of very excellent Australian actors, not least of which is Sean McAuliffe, who is an absolute national treasure.
Yeah, he needs another show.
He does. He's Mad as Hell is good, and is very much a good laugh. But I think he needs another thing that isn't just news parody.
No, like a pseudo Colbert Report thing.
Yeah. I think he one of the things that I like most about him is that he's believable in any role, and I think it's. I mean, I'm not going to tell him he needs to go and do it, because who the hell am I? And he's a grown man. He can do what he wants. But I think it's an untapped area of potential to have him doing pseudo-realistic news parody as opposed to once a week Australian news drama. There was the one that he was in a few years ago. I'm trying to remember what it was. One moment. Where was it? So, Talking About Your Generation was very amusing. That was the Australian sort of news game show. Sorry, you'll want to cut this out while I remember exactly what I'm just looking at his. I cannot remember what it was. Maybe it was the XPM. Was the one I was thinking of, but he's been in a lot of very good Australian. Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Murder. That was it. It was one season, and they were they were a married couple that ran an industrial cleaning business that went in and cleaned up crime scenes. Went in and cleaned up crime scenes, and as a result became amateur crime fighting super sleuths. It was a very amusing show that sadly only got a single season, but I think it was a very good use of his talents, because he was able to be funny and in character and dry and sarcastic.
So that just, for some reason, reminded me of Let the Blood Run Free.
I'm not familiar.
Oh boy, are you one of today's lucky 10,000?
I believe I am.
So Let the Blood Run Free was a medical comedy drama series that was evolved out of an improv stage show.
Okay.
Every episode of it was improvised basically in the week before filming.
Oh, fantastic.
They had, at the end of every episode, a phone poll that you could vote to see what would happen.
Okay.
They had just a weirdly... It is so bizarrely Australian. I am surprised it hadn't come up for you.
I will absolutely... This is going to be one of those things that I absolutely try and track down somewhere.
It is all available on YouTube because
Perfect.
DVDs are out of print.
Oh, 100%. And if I'm looking at it correctly, it was from 1990 to 94, so probably in Creative Commons at this point. So
yeah, but it's just like, okay, the writers have no idea what the fans are going to vote for, so we have to wait for the results to come in before we look at the script.
Fantastic. Yep, putting that on the list.
It's so very good.
Excellent. Oh, yeah, here we go. 26 from Rush Cutter Entertainment. 26 episodes in a playlist right there for my consumption. Beautiful. Put this on the watch later list.
You will notice some very well-known Australian comedy talents.
Excellent. That's what I like to see.
Question 8. Sometimes our engagement with a piece of media comes from a position of relativity. Did you have a character that you related to, and what drew you to them?
Yes, two of them actually. So, Jack Simpson, the main character played by Mick Malloy, is every single office job worker in their early 20s. I basically saw a slightly curlier and longer mulleted hair version of myself. Um, lives in a house with his mates, uh, drinks too much, you know, is a bit of a dickhead. Excuse the French. Um, Absolutely clear cut everyman Australian. The other one um, is his, I guess, sort of uh, his offsider as a main character, which is Stan Coombs, who's played by the late Bill Hunter, um, who is everyone's dad and granddad. He's the sort of um, father figure. He's the captain of the bowls team. He's the straight shooter, no nonsense guy. Um, Very specifically, he did. He asks. So they're doing their catch up at their first game, and Stan's doing the conversation and small talk. And he says, "What about you, Stan? What did you do?" He said, 20 years in the Navy. So my dad spent 20 years in the Navy, and at that point, Stan Coombs became my dad. it's it's astonishing. The I guess the symbolism that you get. He, they do a homebrew night where he comes around and they mess about in the apartment, getting drunk and having a laugh. And then the next day, he's stands right as rain. Um, he's up and he's early and he's doing stuff. Um, Mick Malloy rolls up and he goes, it's a, sorry I'm late. Homebrew my ass. Get that shit down to forensics. As Stan Coombs leans over the bench and goes, "Yeah, you think that's bad? Wait till you try the hard stuff." That is such a dad sentence. So I very much those two characters squarely landed in the things that I relate with conversation.
And who said accurate representation was dead?
Exactly, 100%. It's phenomenal. It's very easy, at least for me, coming from my experiences. It's very easy to just sort of sticky tape a cutout of my face and Dad's face on it and just go, yes, there's a memory rather than a movie.
Yes, accurate. Next.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yes, I do remember this conversation.
Question 9. A lot of these types of interviews rely on the question of what would you bring with you to a desert island in order to get to know a person? But that's not what this show is about. What we ask is instead to picture this scenario. You're on a deserted island with no hope of rescue, but food, water, shelter, and all of that have been taken care of, so that you won't succumb before your natural time. You've also been provided with a single piece of media and the means to engage with it, and for you it is Crackerjack. How frequently do you utilize it, and how long would it take for you to be sick of it?
I would say very easily I could watch this movie at least once a week. Not even a question, probably 2 or 3 times a week as part of my normal viewing. And in fact, I did that for a while. I watched it quite regularly. But I'm odd because I'm one of those people that will latch. I'm that person that finds a song they like and then listens to it on repeat for 4 days.
You squeeze it out like a dirty sponge to get all
100
the endorphins out.
Absolutely. I'm going to roll that song out from the bottom so there's no toothpaste stuck in it. Um, absolutely. I'm totally that consumer of media, and so I think very easily 2 or 3 times a week, no questions asked, for the rest of my life, and I'd be happy with it. It's there's enough nuance and humor in it that I don't imagine I would get bored. Um, and even if I did, I think the highlights are there enough. There's the it's a sports movie, so there's natural endorphins in the when things go right moment. which is excellent. I'm totally on board with that. Can I just preface this by saying it's probably a sign of the times that we're in, that when you said all of your things have been taken care of. You've got food and shelter and water and guaranteed not to expire before you're natural. I went, oh, geez, that's a nice concept.
Oh, the luxury.
Yeah, good grief. What did I do to deserve this? This is fantastic. One Powerball, eh?
Yeah. Well, your own private island and all. Oh.
Exactly. Yeah, your own private island. You don't have to. You don't have to consider politics or the great unpleasantness. It's fantastic. I'm all over it.
Yeah. But that is all the questions I had, so thank you for indulging me.
Absolutely happy to do it. The more people I can introduce to this gem, the better.
So hopefully that's given people a little bit of a deeper insight into your perspective.
Yeah, as much as as much as that's safe.
Yeah. So before I ruin the show by talking for myself for a while, it's time for everyone's favourite part, a word from the sponsors. Thank you, sponsors. They're truly one of your best ad reads yet, I'd say.
I'm as much a fan of capitalism as anybody, and sponsors are an important part.
Except don't support the army or the casinos.
Absolutely.
Now, I do have a follow-up review from last episode's enemy of the show and self-proclaimed stamina potion enthusiast, Red, and his recommendation of Gloomhaven. Is this something that you're familiar with?
In passing. I am familiar with the concept, and it's all over my Twitter feed all the time, but not something I've had a chance to experience myself.
So, Gloomhaven is kind of a board game version D&D type game. So you do have your set characters and roles, and you run through like story campaigns, but it is all tactically turn-based grid movement combat.
Awesome. So legacy elements to it?
Yes, very much so. You do, you make permanent changes to the game as you progress.
That is incredibly tempting. Something that my friend group and I do quite regularly is, not as regularly now as we used to, but we've played through each of the first couple of seasons of Pandemic Legacy. We've played Risk Legacy and Betrayal at House on the Hill Legacy. Gloomhaven very much, I think, now on the list of things to add to that pile.
Yeah, I would suggest either looking video stuff or trying an online version first, because the physical version is large,
yes,
and can be time consuming if you are the one basically running it.
It's also with a very brief look, not for the faint of wallet.
Just quietly, yes.
Yeah, I just went, oh, Gloomhaven in my area. I'm not. That doesn't necessarily intimidate me, but it does intimidate me into maybe not an impulse purchase.
Yeah, there is the baby starter edition version of it, which can be folded into the main game.
Gotcha.
I think it's the Jaws of the Lion.
Okay.
Something like that. So the classes are a little bit more limited. Everything's designed to be you learn as you go, rather than throw you right in the deep end.
Just looking at that now, actually, and it's so it's aimed at a more casual audience to get people into the gameplay more quickly, and it is about a quarter of the price, so that's nice as well.
But it is a physically large space requirement that I am aware of. So depending on your situation, it might be easier to find an online version or even a tabletop simulator and run it that way. But it is quite easily a game that you can run for 2 to 6 players, I think, is the maximum.
Perfect.
Before it starts getting unwieldy. And the game automatically adjusts itself difficulty-wise for how many people you use.
Scale up and scale down.
Exactly.
Excellent. Yep, you've sold me. That is 100% on the list now. This is great. I've gone into this as a conversation, and I've come out with a new TV show and a new board game to experience. That's phenomenal. I'm all over it.
Yeah, this is what it's for. We give recommendations in the conversation.
Would you say that it's time for me to check this out?
Wait,
Hey, he said the thing.
the thing, the point at the sign, they love that.
See, they love it when they point at the sign.
But I would honestly give Gloomhaven a 4 out of 5.
Nice.
It can be a little bit where sometimes it feels too much to go through multiple scenarios.
Sure.
And that is when you're doing an online version where it's automatically all done for you to set up.
So it's sort of a day investment.
Yeah, or it's like you book a time of the week. It's like, yep. Cool, it's Gloomhaven time. Set aside your next couple of hours.
Right.
So,
that's very doable, and I think absolutely on the list.
Yeah. So before we wrap up the final ever episode of Check This Out for this recording session, and 13th time that I've made that joke, could you please tell the audience where they might find you online, and if you have anything to advertise?
Nothing to advertise other than go check out Crackerjack. I'm not getting royalties, but I still think it's worth a look. Online, you'll probably see me in chat and commenting on a number of different YouTube and Twitchy type arrangements. But to be perfectly honest, I don't have a massive outward facing online presence anymore. I'm more of a lurker than a poster. But if you recognise me loudly talking from the other side of the pub, I'll always have a free pint if you're willing to talk to a now internet famous podcaster.
And on that note, I've been Al.
I've been Chris.
And this has been Check This Out, a podcast of media positivity. And remember, measure once, shame on me. Measure twice, shame on you.